This is Kathy Beal of EmpowermentUnlimited.net with a look at the complex astrology of the middle of August 2024. We have two configurations that are going to bring incredible release and that also operate like an internal combustion engine. And they are coming to a head at the same time on August 19th as the Democratic National Convention is starting. One of them is going to have a huge release of a lot of things that have been building up. The other is going to play out over a much longer period of time. And both of these fit in the charts of the United States and all four people at the top of the two presidential tickets. So let's see what's going on here. I have the August 19 chart set for when the moon is full in Chicago, where the DNC is going to take place. Don't have the exact time that the event is starting, but these two configurations are happening at the same time. They're both called T-squares. So let's look at the first one. The first one involves the full moon. A full moon is an opposition with the sun in one sign exactly opposite the moon in another sign. And in this case, you see that the sun is at the time of the full moon in Chicago in the house that has to do with politics and also messaging. And the moon is down there in the third house, which has to do with communication. The planet that rules communication is next to the sun, Mercury retrograde, really close. So we may be going back to something with this full moon. This adds more to the overtone of something big coming to a head. Full moons always bring culminations. The Aquarius one, under ordinary circumstances, although I can't think of how long ago it's been that we've had ordinary circumstances, but Aquarius is an intellectual sign. And so the moon in this sign tends to not have a whole lot of drama. There tends to be an airiness or an objectivity to it. But what I find fascinating here is that the moon, which is the seat of emotions, is in this intellectual mode, and the sun, which represents the ego, the reason, the rational end of the equation, is in this really fiery, dramatic, look at me, drama queen mode. You can look at this as male and female, masculine and feminine. And this full moon is in a T-square. This is the first of the engines of change that I'm talking about. It's in an exact T-square to Uranus and Taurus in the seventh house of partners, allies, and open enemies. There is something here that is tying to a lot of activity that's been happening with Uranus earlier this year. At the end of April, Jupiter, which expands everything it touches, met with Uranus in some big kapow. And then on the 15th of July, when the RNC was starting, Mars met with Uranus, and a lot of incredibly shocking events happened that turned the election upside down on its side, any weird way you want to look at it. So this particular full moon is going to have, or does have, a very strong element of something breaking loose, something breaking through, something very unexpected, unusual, I would say a situation where the whole way that the Democratic campaign has run in the last few weeks, very sudden, very surprising, they're running on a truncated schedule. It's going extraordinarily well. So there's something here, and maybe this predicts says something very unexpected will happen in the convention. Maybe there is something about this convention that has an explosive, derailing, disruptive event on, let's just say, an open enemy. How does this fit in with the US chart? Now, I've got the chart for the signing of the Declaration of Independence. This is a chart that is commonly used. I'm not going to get into an argument over which one is correct. Notice that the Sun and Mercury are up in the house of politics, of policy, of legal theory, and the moon is, oh, look at that, exactly on the US moon. Exactly. This is an extraordinarily important moment for the United States because the moon represents the people. And there's something in this full moon configuration squaring that Uranus in the sixth house of service, the normal way of doing things. There's something very startling here that perhaps has a wake up effect on the populace. How does it affect the presidential candidate? Oh man, look at this. All right, so look at the moon up there in her ninth house of politics, of the courts, of policy, and it is close to her midheaven, not by sign, but it's within a few degrees of it, and the moon is right on her Saturn. She has a stabilizing influence on the population. She has openly said she wants an administration that focuses on commonality. This is someone who is intent on bringing order to chaos, bringing order and structure to the people. Also, a Saturn contact is glue. There is something strong and solid here that has the potential for staying power. Notice that the Sun and Mercury retrograde are down in her third house of communication, and they are on her Mars. She has been on fire. She's been very high energy, very playful. Anyone who remembers what her personal campaign for the presidency was during the year that Biden got the nomination, she was very restrained, didn't have a whole lot of personality coming out. Now she's all smiles. She is all over the place. And this full moon has the T square funneling into her 12th house on top of her Jupiter. Jupiter in the 12th house, whether it's by transit or in your natal chart, is, I call this a cosmic nightlight. There's something that gives you the sense of everything's okay, no matter what is going on out in the world. And that Jupiter in Taurus gives a tremendous amount of groundedness. And as Uranus has been moving back and forth over that Jupiter, she has gone from being the vice presidential candidate on the ticket to quite suddenly, very Uranian, quite suddenly the candidate at the top of the ticket. So this could push some behind the scenes stuff out that perhaps we're not privy to. There could still be some machinations going on, but look, I've also circled her ascendant, which is Gemini, 24 Gemini, and her north node at 25 Gemini, her path, what she is to do, which is many different things, but there's something here about communicating a message, communicating information, and that North Node is in a trine, a very easy flow to the moon, and it's in a sextile and a companionable, cooperative opportunity aspect to the sun and Mercury retrograde. There are probably people from the past who will end up being very important and very helpful to her as she moves forward with this. And also notice, which I neglected to put before, that the sun at 27 Leo is trine her moon at 2711, the 11th house. Let's just draw that real quick so you can see it. That was an accident. I was going to go. Okay. So the sun and that Mercury are trine her 11th house moon, and there is a fiery guy who is pumping her up. That would be her running mate. And the moon at 27 Aquarius is in a sextile or an opportunity aspect to her moon. So this is a tremendously supportive full moon for her. Okay, now let's look at what it's doing to her running mate. Notice that it's not hitting quite as much. It's going across his houses of his self-expression, with the sun and Mercury down there in the 5th house, opposite the moon in the 11th house, which is his group associations, dreams, and wishes. So this is the popularity that he had while he was in Congress. And the T-square is forcing action, forcing change in his 2nd house of talents and abilities, and how he earns his living and what it is he actually does. I would imagine that his sense of self-worth has just blown open, his sense of possibilities of what it is he can do. And notice that his Jupiter, I have circled that at 28 degrees Aries in the 1st house, is in a trine or a very, very easy flow with the moon. With the sun and Mercury. So this is the guy that comes bounding out on stage and starts his speeches with, wow, this is real high energy. This is laughter. This is the constant smiling. And the that Jupiter, which is an extraordinarily lucky placement. And this is, by the way, not a timed chart. No one has come up with a birth time for him yet. So this is a solar chart. But that Jupiter is in a sextile or an opportunity aspect to the moon up there in the 11th house. And remember that that moon is also the US moon. So he's just igniting the populace on fire as well. All right, what's it doing to Donald Trump? Well, this full moon goes across his relationship axis. It pulls in his Mars, which is how he pushes himself forward. This is the anger and the firepower that you see coming out of him. And it's coming to a head up there in his most public part of the chart, and it's on top of his midheaven, which is the doorway to his career house. So this full moon is pushing some kind of massive change or breakthrough or break up in his public position. It's pulling statements from the past, Mercury retrograde in the 12th house, out into the public. It's pulling statements that he made behind the scenes out into the public. And this could be leading to, I would say there is trouble in paradise, as if it was ever paradise, with his presidential ticket. I'll also point out that Uranus has been in his most public part of his chart for some time, and that every big aspect to it, particularly end of April and then the middle of July, when the gun went off in Butler, Pennsylvania, and when uh, the Republican National Convention took place, and also when Judge Eileen Cannon dismissed the documents, classified documents retention case. All those things happened then. So things have been already hammering and destabilizing it. And the fact that it's so close to his midheaven, the column that is the pillar that his whole life is built on, things have been hammering his public position, his career. And if you go down into the fourth house, that's also his home base, his family, his sense of security and stability in the world. This is another massive destabilizing blast. And this is his running mates chart. Now, JD Vance is has the same angles, almost the same degrees as Trump. So you'll notice that the sun moon opposition is going across his first and seventh houses. It also has to do with relationship issues, that retrograde Mercury in the 12th house, things coming to light about stuff he said, his views about women. Venus is there being a big part of it, and all of this dumping out into his into that Uranus up there in his career house. But notice that this one isn't just a T-square. This is a wide grand cross, because in the base, opposite that Uranus is Mars in Scorpio conjunct his fourth house cusp. Mars in Scorpio, whatever the moneyed interests are, maybe this is Peter Thiel, who I think he worked with and is one of the huge backers of his candidacy, my understanding. There's hidden secrets, whatever. But since this is a grand cross and not the engine of a T-square, this has more of the sensation of being suspended in time, pulled in multiple directions, and basically having to just live through it and see what's going to happen. So the real action-oriented hits Trump's chart, and Vance is more like the hanged man, or someone that's like suspended over the situation and waiting to see what others are going to do. The other T-square, well, that one is a fixed T-square, meaning that all of the signs that are involved tend to stay in place. And because Uranus is there, something is going to be explosive and blow them open. The other T-square is in mutable signs. Mutable is like reeds. It goes back and forth, moves in the wind, very flexible, very changeable. This one has been slowly building since the end of May, and it is going to tighten 3 times. Tighten on August 19th, then loosen up a little bit, but the two main players will continue traveling together. It will tighten up again on Christmas Eve, then loosen up a little bit, and then next summer, the two main players will change signs and square again in cardinal signs, which make things happen, which starts things. So the first component here in the seventh house of partners and alliances and open enemies, the first group is that Jupiter in Gemini conjunct Mars in Gemini. Jupiter is a planet of expansion and amplification. It has been in the sign of Gemini since May 25th, and Mars has just moved off an exact conjunction with it. It's still close enough that we're feeling it. So amplification of amplification, all the noise, all the information just flying everywhere, 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 everywhere. This is a campaign that is drawing record crowds, lots of information, lots of communication, And again, we'll see what it might do to the challenger, who is definitely a piece of this. And this is squaring Saturn in Pisces. Saturn, so Jupiter is all about more, 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 expand, expand, amplify. Saturn says contract, slow down, whoa. Saturn puts up walls, hysterical walls. Just think about it. Saturn puts up walls, it slows things, it wants order, it wants accountability. I call it the planet of adulting. Sometimes I call it the party pooper of the zodiac. When there's a square like this, there's a demand for something to happen. Saturn in Pisces in the fourth house. It's like the homeland, how everybody feels about things. There's something here saying we want to put some, there's a striving here to put some structure on all the noise, on all the running around, and can we please do something to contain, arguably this is an interpretation, the loud and all over the place lying male. That's the Gemini. Gemini, not all Geminis do this, but being fast and loose with the truth and playing all sides of the coin, definitely a Gemini possibility here. But so these are the two, Gemini, Jupiter and Saturn are going to come to kind of have the square 90 degrees apart, exact on the 19th. Then they're going to be at a slightly different location on Christmas Eve, and then next summer they're both going to be at the beginning of Cancer and Aries. They're going to move into the next signs afterwards. So this is the first measuring point in a process actually that started December 20th, 21st, 2020, when Jupiter and Saturn met at the very beginning of Aquarius and set a 20-year process in motion. And that was when the vaccine started rolling out. That was in the thick of the pandemic. So doing something here about a situation that arguably hurt a lot of people. And I'm not saying from the vaccine, I'm saying from whatever, all the stuff that happened with COVID and what happened with the way it wasn't handled and what happened to the economy, and all those aspects of it are wired into what this meeting on August 19th is about. But wait, there's more. And so let's add. Okay, there's one other player in the mix, and I have circled up there in the 10th house, the most public house, career. There's Venus in Virgo. Venus, women, a woman, but women, values in Virgo, sign of healing, sign of improving, women's health issues, body issues being huge and part of this, built into it. But interestingly, also with the dichotomy with Venus being opposite Saturn, just look at the symbolism. We have a woman with an intellect who's looking at things and saying how they can be done better on one end, and on the other hand, and we have a masculine figure that connects to the whole. So this is the ticket. Kamala is up there as Venus in Virgo, and you'll see exactly why in a minute. And her running mate with the big dad energy, who makes sure that people are okay if they're having hydration issues, Pisces. During the rallies, the person with the track record of why don't we feed our children, what is wrong with that? It's just beautiful. We've got a masculine archetype, leader archetype, compassionate leader archetype, and a feminine archetype working together to amplify a message or to bring something that maybe is going to go after an open enemy. And interestingly, okay, let's look at what's happening with the US chart with this. I should have put this earlier. So the at the top of the chart, that Venus in Virgo is in the ninth house of law and policy, and it is moving into a conjunction with Neptune, which is a marker for uh, several things in the way the US has run. Venus in Virgo started as separation of church and state, and it has molted into something quite different, but it's also a marker for racism. And so or what we do with the lesser ones in our society. So Venus, women's issues, a dispassionate way of looking at things, fusing with that, and we have a biracial candidate who is a woman. And opposite that, down here in the bottom, it's opposite that Saturn in the third house. So that's the masculine figure speaking up, speaking out, and they're both pressuring that Jupiter Mars conjunction in the seventh house. Now, look at where that is. It's on top of, it's close enough. We're going to call it a conjunction with Mars in Gemini in the US chart. So there are a lot of Geminis who in the last 6, 8, 7, 8, 9 years have been really prominent in the course of things. I could give you quite a long list of them, but there's something with this particular moment with the woman and the man teaming up to go after forces that have essentially attacked what the US is about. On another way of looking at this is that Jupiter conjunct Mars up there in the seventh is amplifying a message of optimism and possibility, which I think is going on in what they do. Now, what is this doing to Kamala specifically? The Saturn up there in her 10th house of career, the highest point in the chart, her being the issue of leading the masses. It's on her Chiron, which is possibly, that's being empathetic, being for the underdog, feeling a sense of underprivilegedness, not at this point in her life, but there is an awareness and a leakage of boundaries, of not being completely intact with others. And it is, excuse me, get this out of the way. So sorry that I didn't move that earlier. And it's opposite Venus in her fourth house, transiting Venus in her fourth house of her base. And oh, looky what? She's got Venus in Virgo in her natal chart, and it is exactly opposite Saturn in the sky. And that Venus, so Venus in the sky is conjunct her Venus in her natal chart, and those are conjunct her Uranus-Pluto conjunction, which is a signature of people who were born in the mid-60s. It's a signature of being change agents. And there's something in this moment at the Aquarius full moon on August 19th that is activating and bringing to life her natural wiring to fight for women's issues. And the T-square is dumping into her 12th house, Jupiter and Mars. So who knows what kinds of stuff is being said. I would imagine she's not sleeping much these days with that kind of activity going on in her 12th house. And by the way, this is a timed chart. But look at how this is touching something else in her chart. She has a generational marker. Her Neptune is in Scorpio in the 6th house. So this could be a sense of calling, working with criminals. She was a prosecutor for a long time, doing something that had a sense of higher purpose, but also making a difference in the world. And notice that Scorpio, Neptune in Scorpio is trine Saturn in the 10th house, the most public house, and it's in a sextile or an opportunity aspect to her Venus and Venus in the sky, and then by conjunction, her Uranus Neptune. So it's almost like this is her moment. She has been called to do this, to do something as a consequence. How is it hitting her running mate chart? Notice that, okay, the Saturn is on his Chiron, exactly. So he's mastering, he's bringing forward, there's about his ability to empathize and to feel things with other people. Um, and that is opposite Venus in Virgo in the 6th house of service. So that's working with a woman on improving things, and that Saturn and Venus are squaring. Jupiter and Mars down there in his 3rd house of communication. So more messaging, more to come out. But notice the important bit of this. I've already marked. He also has Neptune at 17 Scorpio up there in the 8th house. That's what he invests in, what he puts time, money, energy into, and what he gets out of it. There's also a sense of doing something for a higher purpose, trying to transform the world. And that you would see this in his story about the effectiveness that he had as a teacher and as a coach. And this is in a trine or an easy flow with that Saturn on top of his Chiron. He's stepping into this naturally, and that Neptune is in a sextile or an opportunity aspect with uh, Venus in Virgo in the 6th house. He was made an offer and he accepted it. And also note that what I did not put in here is that that Jupiter and Mars down here in the 3rd house are sextile or in an opportunity aspect to his sun. So this is another instance of a moment that seems to have been, what he was born for. The nodes, that the North Node is at 8 Aries. It's moving backwards. So pretty soon it's going to be exactly on top of his Mars. At 6 Aries, he's got the ability to just jump and shoot and do whatever is needed. And shoot, I mean metaphorically. Okay. So what's this doing to Donald Trump? This is an aspect I have been watching for quite some time. And let me delineate it. So let's start up there in the top of the chart. He has Uranus naturally in the most public part of his chart, and it is conjunct his North Node and his Sun, and opposite his Moon. He is you could call him a change agent. He's a disruptor. He's a maverick. He goes rogue. There is a heavy amount of unpredictability attached to him and his public life. Jupiter is right on top of that. Jupiter at 17 Gemini is right on top of his Uranus. So it's pumping it up and pumping it up and pumping it up. And Mars there as well is adding to it. So there's a more of a forcefulness than normal. Also, possibly there is an upsurge in assaults on his being rogue, being a change agent, being whatever it is he is. And I'll just throw in that this Uranus is what rules his health. So there may be a health component and it may be a brain component that's part of this. All right, so we've got Jupiter up there on his Uranus, and Saturn in the seventh house, Saturn in Pisces, exactly squaring that, Saturn being the government, Saturn being order, Saturn being rules, Saturn being the courts, in the house of allies and open enemies. I'm going to say, let's look at it from an open enemy point of view. So that's pushing in. And opposite that, we have Venus in his house of identity, also pressuring that Uranus. So this is a combination for something's got to give, massive release point, something big, explosive, moving forward. And his own natal Jupiter is part of it because it's down there in the second house. I've circled it, the second house of his own cash, his own values, his own assets, his own resources, and it is exactly trying that. And right when this is building, a story has come out about the president of Egypt, that would be that Mars up there in the 10th house, having given him an enormous amount of money before, while he was a candidate, and it ending up in his campaign. So there are issues that are brewing with this. I have, for a long time, seen this culmination as a legal Iron Maiden closing in on him. We'll see and look who might embody it. So again, remember that so Jupiter is exactly on his Uranus. We've got Saturn in the house of open enemies pushing in on that, saying we got to have containment, there has to be accountability, there must be responsibility. And opposite that, there is a female influence that's very public, that's going right at his identity, and it is conjunct that Jupiter, that Uranus and Pluto, and coming at him. Kamala Harris is the physical embodiment of this T-square hitting Donald Trump. When she says she knows his type, it is much more than that. She also knows what to do with / about it. Outside of what I was talking about, but I'll just throw in here that her Saturn at 28 Aquarius conjunct his seventh house cusp is another indicator of her clamping down or putting the brakes on him. And if you look at the Democratic ticket as Venus being the woman and Saturn being the man, both closing in on him, this chart embodies that as well. So what does it do for JD Vance? Well, it hits a lot of stuff. It doesn't hit things exactly for him. The Jupiter and Mars are in his 10th house because his cusps are pretty much the same as Donald Trump's. So that Jupiter and Mars, so there is something very, very public, but it might not directly involve him because the squaring coming at that position is coming out of his relationship axis. And I'm going to say that Venus in Virgo, putting limits on women, the boundaries he has for women, and the patriarchal, perhaps you can call it Bible-based potential of Saturn and Pisces squeezing in on that. So lots and lots more noise. And it does have a terrific amount to do with what he's communicating about relationships, because his moon in the third house of relationships is in an unbroken flow with the Mars and the Jupiter up there. So we'll be hearing much, much, much more about him and about his own relationships, and whatever is going on with Trump is going to, of course, blow back and involve him as well. One more piece I want to put in this. This is very complicated, but this is Trump's chart is in the middle, and then the full moon chart is the second ring. Kamala's chart is the third ring, and Tim Walz's chart is the fourth ring. So notice that Kamala and Tim both have something that is on the influence that's demanding order. And that is slamming down on Trump's change agent, rogue agent, disruptor. Also genius and innovation, but clamping down on, whatever it is he's been doing, that fits in with it. And that the two of them also are coming in on him. Tim doesn't have, he only has, he has Pluto with Kamala's Uranus down there in the first. That's really crummy looking. Let me fix that. Okay. So if you look at this, but the bottom line is that he's got something too that's part of this arm squeezing Trump. He's in a vise. This is a very effective ticket for going after the other candidate and reining him in. So remember that the second square, the one involving Jupiter and Saturn, exact on the 19th. We'll see it again right around Christmas time at 13 degrees, Gemini and Pisces. And then we'll see it again early next summer when I really think other people are going to be out of the picture in a big way. So thank you very much. You can find me at empowermentunlimited.net, and let's see how this plays out.